The pronouncement that the National Education Association wants us to start using the term birth person rather than mother should come as no surprise, nor should any other idiocy aimed at producing social chaos. Confounding the language is a big step towards creating social change. Creating social change is a Marxian tactic. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels called for a social revolution. Only by creating a social revolution can the communists succeed and hold on to their gains. Part of this social revolution is to change even the language we use. In this manner, they get us thinking in different terms than the language on which our civilization is based. It should come as no surprise that the NEA is promoting a socialist revolution. For years, they've tried to get everyone in their union to read Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, a book dedicated to Lucifer. That's right, Lucifer, just another name for Satan. Once he had trained their staff, and then the public awareness of just who and what Alinsky was, they dropped the book from their website, as well as their recommended reading list. But you can still find it archived in certain places on the web if you search for NEA Recommended Reading. The NEA, as well as the American Federation of Teachers, another socialist-oriented teachers union, are affiliated with Education International, started by an American socialist leader, Albert Shanker. He was an advisor to the Young People's Socialist League. Shanker became the first president of the Education International. EI is a merger of the so-called Free World Teachers Unions and the Communist Teachers Unions right after the so-called collapse of communism in the Soviet Empire. None of the communist teachers behind the Iron Curtain resigned. They just began calling themselves Democrats. The EI, as well as the NEA directly, work so closely with UNESCO, the educational arm of the United Nations, that you can say they are simply an arm of the United Nations. It should come as no surprise that the teachers' unions are in the process of changing our children into Marxist minions. It is no accident. It is by design. By the way, they always brag as to how many of their members are delegates to the Democrat convention during election years. In many school districts across the land, you cannot teach unless you join the teachers' unions. It is a closed shop, and reasonable teachers have become the victims of their policies as much as the students. Years ago, I was involved in trying to reform the public schools, but doing my research, it became obvious that the government system was impossible to reform since it was based on the idea that government can teach your children better than you can or private education can. This is false. History has proven that government cannot do better in anything compared to the private sector. The only reason it may appear to be the case is that government is a monopoly in some sectors and private enterprise is not allowed to compete. The time is now to get your children out of government schools and into private and home schooling. The majority of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were partially or completely homeschooled. As a result, they thought independently, not how the government or some institution wanted them to think. Many of our presidents were homeschooled to some extent, starting with George Washington. The most famous was Abraham Lincoln, with his successor, Andrew Johnson, taught by his wife to read and do arithmetic. Of course, we always recommend Freedom Project Academy, a superb method of providing home education. Now, I would like to also answer a comment or two from last week. Some feel that doorbelling is not the way to go. Ladies and gentlemen, by doorbelling in your area, you meet people with which you can build local organization. Organization of active chapters of the John Birch Society is what counts in the long run. It is the bedrock of the conservative constitutional movement. Those who do not think so are not familiar with why the Marxists are so successful. They're organized in the true sense of the word. They never have large numbers, but they know how to organize them into a dedicated army. Almost no conservatives or constitutionalists are thus organized, and that's why they've been losing all along. They don't get it. And some do not want to take the responsibility for getting involved, for getting to work. It is a sad commentary about society today. And it is why Robert Welch developed our slogan, less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. More responsibility at all levels, civic, religious, and especially on an individual basis, but working together locally on a concerted national program. Get involved now, or you will have no one to blame but yourself if we lose.